Hello everyone. Arnold Schwarzenegger here to pump you up with another exciting episode of the Project Flux Podcast. This week, we're flexing our brains with some heavy hitters in the tech world. First, we dive into Autodesk's new generative AI. This tool is not here to terminate creativity, but to enhance it. Next, we'll explore Microsoft's latest AI work study. And for our big finish, we tackle a massive question: is AI underhyped? Get ready, it's going to be a mind-blowing episode. Let's get to the chopper and start this adventure.
Hello there everyone, and welcome to Project Flux for another episode of the world of AI in project delivery. Another week's gone past, can you believe? And there truly has been some huge announcements this week. Literally just dropped has been the news that OpenAI have released ChatGPT, what they're calling ChatGPT 4.0. We haven't really had time to unpack it all, apart from the fact that this really feels like it's HAL from 2001 and you can have a full-on conversation with it. But we're going to do a special, Yoshi and I are going to unpack that, and we're going to do a special podcast recording of that in the next day or so to give it the attention it deserves. But big news, and as I say every week, it's like not a week goes past without some other big story hogging the limelight, and that certainly has turned a few heads, and I'll be looking forward to unpack that in a lot more detail. So as normal, please subscribe to the podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the newsletter that we release every single Monday. We're growing fast. We've got loads of subscribers coming in, and it's a real joy of ours to present all this news to everyone, because we know how important this is to the future of project delivery. This is what's going to make a difference. And I think the world is kind of catching up with what I think a lot of people were thinking was the way that this was going to go. So yeah, please subscribe to make sure you don't miss out. One last call. This podcast will come out on the 15th of May. And on the evening of the 15th of May will be the Project Data Analytics Task Force meetup, which is now online. It's changed slightly. It's going to be online. So if you weren't able to make it in person, you should now be able to make it online. We're going to put the link in the show notes. It's available on the meetup and PDA Task Force website. You come along, I think it begins at 6:30. And a couple of hours so you can listen in whilst you're having your dinner or having a drink in the garden, whatever suits you. But do come along. It's going to be another fantastic event. So we've got lots to cover today. We're not going to cover the ChatGPT story because, as I said, we are going to look at that on its own because it warrants its own episode. But there is also plenty of other big stories to unpack, such as Autodesk's new AI-driven architecture design engine called Project Bernini. We're going to look at this study that's come out from Microsoft and LinkedIn, which has got some really interesting stats and facts around it. We've now heard from Digital Construction Week, which is, about a month away, and we're going to sort of unpack that and look at some of the themes that are coming out of Digital Construction Week. Don't know whether you guys are planning on going to Digital Construction Week at all, but should be a really good couple of days out at London Excel. We'll spend a little bit of time thinking about the PDA Task Force event. And at the end, what we did last week, which people seem to really like, was we're going to play another clip and we're going to have a good discussion about the clip. But I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to wait until the end so we can have a go at that. So just a quick one before we introduce our guest. Yoshi, how are you, mate?
I'm very good, mate. I'm excited.
Yeah?
For this podcast and new developments.
Yeah, it's every day's a holiday, right?
Well, there's just so many tools that you want to try and you want to commit to, and then another provider's got another version of that tool. So do you wait? You wait for big tech? You just got to start. But there's just so much to go through, and it is fascinating.
Yeah,
it really is.
Well, we'll get your views and all the latest trends as we go through that. But before that, we are very lucky to have another member of the Project Data Analytics Task Force with us today. We have Nick Stepanov. So I've known Nick for a while now, and Nick is another apprentice as well who's done the data analyst training and has really taken this to heart. So a little bit about Nick. Nick's an award-winning data analyst, and he's an expert in digital transformation. And he's got an excellent track record delivering cutting-edge digital platforms for major projects for blue-chip companies. I believe you work for Mott MacDonald, Transport for London, HS2. But recently he's gone into the startup world and he's co-founded InForecast, which is a really innovative startup. It leverages AI, but really leverages AI, doesn't just say it does, and to streamline ESG compliance in real estate. So we're going to talk to you a bit about that, Nick, in a minute. But you hold quite a few qualifications for a young man like yourself. You've got MBCS, the RITEC, you're a full member of the APM, and you've got quite a few awards, which is great. And
He's a busy man.
he is a busy man, and he's done 3 Innovate UK funding wins, which is no mean feat, having filled out an Innovate UK form. How much time that takes. That must have added in at least your first couple grey hairs. But I think the proudest thing I'm to say is, I get to work with Nick on the Project Data Analytics Task Force. He provides a great contribution to that and a different mindset now that you're working in the SME world. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James.
So just to start with, I mean, there's a lot there that you've done already. Can you just sort of very briefly share with us your journey and the key kind of experiences that led you to finding InForecast?
Yeah, of course. It's been quite a journey. I started my journey as a construction project manager at Mott MacDonald, and I was essentially managing day-to-day working on projects like Kew Gardens, for example, where you actually go on site, get to manage stakeholders. Back then, I started picking up that lots of the stuff that we do as project managers can be streamlined, and some of the stuff just seems to be, I would say, bluntly speaking, it's just a little bit boring, right? And you want to make our jobs exciting, and we really want to be there to solve, more critical challenges and help clients with decision making. And I think this is where kind of my inspiration came from. Thankfully, with great support from Mott MacDonald, they transferred me to specialist advisory services, where I was responsible for product management for project management teams. I have started building together with the team a platform for managing all the core aspects of project management, like cost, risk, and schedule. And it was really exciting journey. Lots of different stakeholders. It was kind of my first, real experience at kind of complex product management.
Yeah. When was that? How many years ago was that, Nick?
That was so I think that particular project, it started in about 2020, around that time.
Okay, so you've been at this a fair time.
Yeah, and I've been managing that project for a couple of years. And we took it from essentially an idea on a piece of paper, and having signed off, the business case, assembled the whole team because there were no skills to actually develop it. And it was quite exciting, trying to figure out, what is it that you need. And having delivered it, I found that another opportunity could be around helping projects deliver ESG, because this was a new kind of topic, it was a hot topic, but no one really knew what that meant. To be honest with you, I haven't got that in-depth understanding of it before, but I thought that delivering something for the industry could really kind of help the process for it, and that's why I decided kind of to focus on. But more importantly, we all know how busy we are with corporate life, because you get pulled into so many different directions, and you have so many projects running at the same time. So I just wanted to wrap my head around one single project and divert all my efforts and focus to that passion and try it out, and that's kind of what drove me to do that.
Yeah, well, it's a brave move for sure. And I think, going back to 2020, those were the days well before people's heads were being turned by this. And you talked about data analytics or AI, people looked at you like you were mad then. So it was a brave move, but I'm glad that it's all starting to pay off. But, you've mentioned some of the challenges there, but what have been the most significant challenges you faced kind of making that pivot from corporate world to building InForecast? And how did you overcome them, I guess?
Yeah, so, well, the building of actual InForecast began about 2 years ago. So 4 years ago, I started with product management, but 2 years ago, we co-founded InForecast. I think one of the greatest challenges is to be able to, because when you get so inspired by a certain idea, and, surely all the people here and, most of the people who listen to this podcast, they all have lots of different ideas where they want to, take their business or take their startup. And one of the greatest challenges that we face, and I face in particular, is being able to kind of refocus yourself on what the problem actually is and what problem you're trying to solve. And I think that took us quite a bit. And frankly, even now we are still kind of experiencing a bit of challenges. You wanna build something that delivers value, and that value ideally should extrapolate quite well, and ideally not only in construction, but beyond construction and in the other industries, and that was quite a challenge. And also, I think, which is quite important skill for a digital transformation in general, and for all of our communities to be able to connect better. And as you know, in every kind of startup, you normally have two people as co-founders. Ideally, you have one technical person responsible for the platform development, and then you have a second person who is more like a salesperson in a nutshell, right? If you boil it down, right?
And you have a co-partner in Forecast, right?
Yes, I do have a co-partner. So my role is more around kind of sales and building partnerships, and that skill was quite difficult for me to acquire as well, because I feel that to some people it comes naturally, and to some people it's a little bit more challenging. But it's so crucial if you want to drive innovation, and we want to try and implement the AI. Communication, stakeholder engagement is so important to be able to build a robust value proposition to move your idea forward.
Yeah, you've got to start with the end in mind, as they say. And we all get excited by all this new tech and just want to show off the tech, but actually, what we're trying to solve are human problems, aren't they? You take ESG; it's a great example of that. You're actually found something which is a real problem. People trying to work out how are they going to comply with a lot of the kind of endorsements or the mandates that have come out recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that kind of leads me nicely on to a question around your mission. What is InForecast's mission, and what kind of drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, our mission is to make ESG effortless, affordable, and actionable, right? So that's what you see when you go on our website. But what that actually means is we want to make it super simple for people to understand. So, for example, if you have a new rule around biodiversity and net gain, we want every stakeholder who is supposed to be involved in a project, because project is quite complicated. You have many stakeholders, you have many different stages, and all of that evolves as the project moves on. So we want to break it down into a series of small, simple steps in a digestible format for the relevant stakeholders, so they can quickly take the relevant actions by understanding what is required from them.
Yeah, because it is confusing. People know that they've got to deal with ESG, but often they don't know where to start. And I think, from what I've seen from InForecast, that's the beauty of it. It simplifies it, and it does exactly what you said on that mission. And I think it's great that you've got that very, very clear kind of objective and mission, because not all companies do. That's as we said at the beginning. You've got the human part right first, and then you're building the tech around that. But talking of tech, I mean, it's even today with the announcement from OpenAI, it seems to be moving and getting faster and faster all the time. But what would your advice be to other entrepreneurs in terms of the tech that's out there? I don't know if you've seen what other people are looking at. What's exciting you? What's coming next in the InForecast kind of pipeline?
Well, there's so much going on out there. I think what inspires us. Two questions here, probably. I think one is, what inspires us in Forecast, and what's the potential direction where we can go. And in order to answer that, it's probably quite simple. It's all around helping integrate generative AI models to help people create something tailored, something bespoke that suits their operational needs and project needs, and come up with those complicated plans broken down into structured and digestible, actionable. Instead of people having to input everything manually, we try to streamline that process. I guess that hopefully answers your first question. And the second question, what excites me the most? I've been following the technology world for quite a bit now, and I think the parts that excite me the most are around what's happening actually on the construction side. I think this is so exciting. I mean, I saw that there are increasing number of startups in automation and robotics and 3D printing. And, it's fascinating to see. When I was at Construction Week, for example, you actually saw guys printing buildings there, mini buildings, but it's very exciting to
It's
see.
mad, isn't it?
It's absolutely mad.
Well, it was a couple of weeks ago. We covered it. There was a BBC article. We covered it when I had Joe Grist on. Around there's a 3D printer that's the size of a blue whale.
Yeah. And
Just Nick, so just a quick follow-up question in regards to your roadmap, because with the breakthrough of generative AI, and we know how quickly and how fast AI is developing, how agile do you have to be with your roadmap for InForecast?
Good question.
it really comes down to, although the technology may be kind of rapidly changing, and there may be lots of external factors that may affect your product roadmap, but I think what kind of helps us is being able to focus on the key targets customer groups. So you essentially select a subset of projects or people, and then you try and solve a particular problem for them, and that helps kind of narrow down quite a lot in terms of what you can do. Because frankly, when you're working with software as a service and you want to make it a scalable technology, there's not too much flexibility that you can do. So you need to be very careful into how you manage your backlog, and making sure that something you deliver is actually of value to a lot of people, not just a single customer.
And does that mean you have to be? So do you lean on being more reactive or proactive when it comes to adapting some of these AI technologies for your roadmap?
I think we're being more. We aim to be more reactive in terms of listening to customers, because customers get to decide what is necessary out there, but we are being proactive with how we're going to tackle that problem and try and integrate the technology that is going to be more robust in the future. But the problem is with the new technology, right? So for example, you all heard about graph databases. So the problem with that, well, not with that technology, but some new technology, is that sometimes maybe the case that you don't know how that technology is going to behave when you're going to scale your technology.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, and that's the problem, right? If you choose a completely new technology stack that you haven't worked with before, you don't know what to expect from it.
Yeah, it's a big risk. And I know it's tempting to use the latest technology, but sometimes you don't want to be, you need to just play it out and wait to see how that technology is adopted, because there's no point in putting all your eggs in one basket. And then, so yeah, I think that's a sensible approach. Right. I mean, for everyone, do check out Nick's company and Nick's profile. We'll put it in the show notes. And there's loads of information on the website, but I thoroughly recommend checking out InForecast. Really innovative solution solving the real world problems. On that, and we're going to move on to some stories now. So thanks very much for that, Nick. But the first question the first story I wanted to look at is Autodesk. Autodesk have announced something called Project Bernini, which is an AI-driven architectural design that enables 2D images to be converted to 3D. And this is for all sectors, obviously, but for the building and built environment and project delivery sector, this is going to really increase creativity, I feel, or will certainly have an impact on creativity. And it's going to enable architects or whoever, other designers, to generate multiple design variations really quickly. So imagine having a situation where, you're with a client and you want to kind of generate a number of different designs based on a 2D sketch. How do you think that might enhance or maybe even hinder an architect's creative process? Anyone for that one?
That's a really good question. I think, if you allow me, I'll try and make an educated guess here. I think it's going to be quite similar to what you see with generative AI. When you write an email, sometimes it's quite difficult to come up, with a full version. It takes quite a bit of time, and you just give it some pointers, and it gives you a great first draft. So I think what's going to happen with that technology, at least it's going to start with a great drafting tool to help architects come up with the right ideas, or sense check the ideas. For example, quickly optioneering, earlier stages, Rebus stage 2, for example, checking, what the layout will look like. I think it's a great tool. And then once you make kind of a more strategic decision, you can then drill down and actually work, more hands-on on what the details should look like.
Yeah, I think it's going to enable people to make a start. And I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm sure there'll be those who will say this is, like the devil, and it's taking away architects' credibility. But going back to, what you're doing with Infor, I think it talks about an emphasis on eco-friendly materials and energy efficiencies. Those variations can almost instantaneously tell you what the most energy efficient solution is. So do you think that these kind of tools are going to be able to balance the aesthetics with environmental?
I think that certainly in terms of energy and carbon, because for energy carbon, you have lots of data and it's widely available. We all know about EPC certificates have millions and millions of data sets. It's also quite easy, relatively simple to calculate the return on investment for such sustainability calculations. But when it comes down to more kind of a social component of it, I think it's going to be slightly more tricky, because you would need to consider, the local needs of people and kind of the intricacies of particular groups of people and stakeholders on site. So, for example, you may have people who are more sensitive to certain environments, and it makes it a lot more difficult to account for that. But I think in terms of energy and carbon, I would say definitely yes. I'm really excited to see what's that gonna bring to us.
Yeah, and I think it will take away the gut feel, saying, "Oh, this does." You'll be able to have variations given to you by this Project Bernini, and you'll know, what is the most effective. You'll be able to make that trade-off.
I think though, James, if you look on the other hand, with some of these Gen AI tools, the more creative processes, there might be a level of over-reliance on the generative AI.
That was going to be my question to you: is, with these things coming out, is this going to change clients' expectations? Are they going to be expecting instant designs? I mean, there is definitely a concerning side to it.
Yeah, I mean, there is, and architects like to flex their creative process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think using Gen AI might supplement that, but however, some architects might like to really flex their creativity, and using AI might take away some of that originality, which might then lead to a lack of adoption from some architects. But I did like a quote that, as an architect, I think it was Neil Leach, he mentioned that architects are like ostriches with their head in the sand. Okay, and he said that regarding AI and the need to design the future of their profession or risk being left behind, he believes architects are too focused on just the images AI can create. So we're very superficially focused on the images that we can get from some of these models. So Bernini, for instance, is trained on, I think, 10 million or so images. Yeah. Now that's not been trained on carbon data or other data associated with the construction phase of a project. However, Autodesk do have a suite of software which, when combined, using AI is combined. So I think they have it's the total carbon analysis. Part of Autodesk is an AI tool for carbon, right? You supplement that with the Bernini model, and then you get a much more richer data, which can more easily feed into the construction phase of a project, which I think takes away some of that reticence from architects.
Yeah, and this is where it's going with Autodesk. I imagine it's kind of the interoperability between all their solutions. So
exactly,
it's another thing that we have to be aware of, because as we've talked about in previous podcasts, you're going to get to the point in the not too distant future where clients could literally just go to a software package for a design, a cost, a program, schedule, ESG, and have it all done by generative design with no human in the loop. And that does worry me.
And the important part you'll think about, though, is when it comes to the output of that AI model, you still have to have the prompt. So there's a level of upskilling for architects, and again, it's that famous argument that it needs to work in tandem with the architect, not replacing their role, because it needs to have that prompting, it needs to have that SME or domain expertise.
Yeah, and playing devil's advocate, I think it's also important to consider, having read lots of architectural reports, and probably James, you have read loads as well. It's so important to consider, the local heritage and history, and what the surrounding area looks like and what it craves for, and I think in that area is a little bit more challenging, right? Because you have lots of buildings that you have fit into that data model, but how would it know exactly what that area looks like? It would take a lot of time, I think, to reach that point naturally.
Yeah, but I mean, that is possible though, isn't it, with geo-tagging, etc., that I'm sure that they'll get to the point where you'll be able to, it will know the area that it will ask you what area you're thinking about your building, and it will take that into account when giving its generative design ideas, and even to the point that it will probably start understanding, for instance, council's planning laws and advice to make sure it gives something that is likely to comply. So this is where it's going. But at the moment, I agree. I think this is just going to be a tool. a way to sort of kickstart the creative process.
Definitely. Creative blocks and all that sort of stuff.
But we do need to be careful, as you know, we've talked about quite a lot before about where this is going, because it's very, very easy to sleepwalk into a situation that you cannot get yourself out from. And I'll go back to the Blockbuster scenario or the Spotify scenario and Uber scenario, where, you know, once you're there, once you walk through that looking glass, there's probably no going back. So as project professionals listening to this, you know, yes, play with these tools, but always be careful. Always imagine where could this go.
There was a really great podcast from Lex Friedman, and you might know him. He's a great guy, and you know, he was saying that as long as you have people calling all the shots, we are really safe. I think it becomes much more difficult to control once you have AI producing something and then AI signing it off.
Yeah,
you know, then it's going to be a problem.
Go there. Yeah. Well, let's save that for later when we get to our clip, because we can have a long debate around that. But for now, let's move on to the next story. By the way, all these stories come from our newsletter, which is published on the Mondays. The full version of it can be found by subscribing to the newsletter, going on to the Project Flux web. They're all there. But the second story is a study that was done by Microsoft and LinkedIn. They're called their 2024 Work Index Trend Study. You know, quite a kind of hard slog of a read, but there is some key stats I wanted to talk about there. And in some senses, no real surprises, but we keep getting these stats backing up, you know, what we're seeing on the ground effectively. The first one was about AI adoption in the workplace. And we've always got to bear in mind that these studies are done by, this is what people are saying. And I'm sure the actual figures are higher, because not everyone is going to say that they are using AI in their workplace. But apparently 76% of employees are now using AI to enhance productivity. So any surprises there, guys? Or is that kind of what you expected?
We all expect, right?
Say that again?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it is a bit, isn't it? Because, I mean, it all comes down to just a few tools speaking up the majority of it. I'm sure if you take out ChatGPT, you know, it's probably going to come down to like 7% instead.
Yeah. But as I said, I'm not too surprised, and I would hazard a guess that the percentage is higher than that are using. If you say that the definition is including any like ChatGPT and things like that, so it's definitely having an impact. So I think there's very few people left who haven't at least tried ChatGPT for something, and obviously this new iteration is going to make it even easier to use.
Well, it's a cool thing you mentioned that, James, because you said with ChatGPT, and one thing I saw in one of the articles was BYO AI, and it's bring your own AI. Now, I'm typically familiar with bring your own drinks, right? But in a lot of companies, because the barrier to entry for a lot of AI models and the cost associated with it, or the policies which are precluding workers from using AI, they're having to bring their own AI. And I think a lot of organizations kind of aren't adapting or aware to that need for people to be able to be more productive. So something to look out for, but I thought I'd mention that BYO AI.
Yeah, well, that came from the bring your own device back in the days when before we all had our own mobile phones. The companies gave you the mobile phones, and they then allowed you to bring your own device. But I can see something very similar happening there. And now that, you know, ChatGPT is effectively going to be free, and then we've got the competitors catching up all the time, it's impossible to stop people using it, isn't it? How can't stop people using it? Because it's going to be, we know it's going to be built into the new Apple operating system, so all the iPhones will have it on there. It's going to be built into Google. It's, you know, that figure's going to be 100% within months.
It's probably easier to go with the flow than fight against it, right? At this point.
Yeah. But I think then the next stat is, you know, worth some debate. It says, given that 45% of US executives are hesitant to invest in AI, how significant do you think the barriers to budget and implementation uncertainties are, and what strategies might overcome them? So, you know, you've still got this discrepancy between the people using it and then the execs that aren't quite sure that they want to invest in it yet. How do we get around that?
And that's interesting. I mean, we're probably going to have a bit of bias toward construction, don't we, when you're answering that question? And I think the key here, based on the conversations, you know, with the C-suite people, it seems like that the major concern around the use cases and the value that is going to generate. Because once you enable AI, for example, Microsoft Copilot, the costs stack up quite quickly.
Yeah.
And they just want to make sure that the use cases they select, that they really kind of deliver value. But I think it's just once enough companies pick it up, you always have that curve where you have innovators and early adopters, and you have the majority, and then you have the laggards. I think once you've got past the there's a book called Crossing the Chasm, right? So once you pass that chasm point, then it kind of the rest of the people will start slowly following up. I think you'll end up everyone using it, even though some companies may not even know the exact use cases. They're still going to do it because all of their competitors do it.
Yeah, and it's built into all the tools. It's built into the
Yeah.
Google. It's built into the iPhones. It's built into the Microsoft.
And just to build on that then, James, because budget constraints are going to be a huge thing within this economic climate, right? I think organizations will have some of their strategies lined up. But a way to approach this is being more targeted and starting on a smaller scale, right? So you look for your advocates, you look for those who are interested in AI, and maybe phase your releases out for AI with them if you're going to be using some of these models, right? So you're reducing the number of seats that you're giving some of the workers. Equally, you could start to leverage some open source models and local models like Llama 3, because the operating costs for those are a lot smaller than implementing things like GPT-4 and some of these enterprise versions. So I think, and one thing to mention as well, and Nick, you can probably correct me on this, but there's a maybe leverage government incentives. So I think it was Department of Science, Innovation and Tech have a 6.4 million grant for SMEs enabled to use AI. If that's
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certainly quite a lot of help out there. Now, please don't quote me on that, but things like R&D tax credits, this can certainly help if you're trying to pilot some completely new technology, completely new use cases. But yeah, most likely the grants are actually quite useful, just like the Bridge AI program, where they help connect major companies with AI developers, and they help subsidize that. Plus, you also get some credits to run AI on supercomputers, so to help you test out the technology, pilot the technology. So I think there's certainly lots of help available out there.
And in the UK is one of the best, as we've talked about before, at providing this help. And in Rishi Sunak's address today, he again talked about AI and how it's going to have such a transformative effect. So I think the UK government's right behind it. There is help out there. You've got the Catapult, you've got the Innovate UK grants, and which you've taken advantage of yourself, Nick. So there is things out there. The other thing I mentioned, we talked about last week, these models are also getting smaller. There's going to be the small language models, but the on-device. The landscape's going to change to the point that maybe cost won't be as prohibitive as it currently is. It's still early days. I know it doesn't feel like that because it feels like so much has happened, but it is still early days in this kind of whole generative AI revolution. And, I think a lot of us got into this. I mean, certainly the three of us here have done the apprenticeship, for instance, and I think safely say it was a game changer for all of us. But this report from Microsoft that talks about 68% change in required skills by 2030. And we've all taken advantage of that. So how important do you think that is now to people, in the domain, and our domain being project delivery, construction, that they have to understand that these skills are not optional. You're going to have to upskill yourself in AI, data analytics to stay, up with the pack effectively.
Yeah, I think it's going to become essentially a hygiene factor. So it's something that you must have, just like using Office 365. It's a key skill requirement because it's going to be so essential to doing day-to-day tasks. Because otherwise, if you have other employees who are using AI and being twice as efficient, you can definitely see that on the books, and therefore the companies are likely to drive that change across the industry.
Yeah, and
hygiene factor. That's exactly it.
And just to follow up on that as well, I think on the same paper, it said 66% of leaders won't hire without AI skills, but 39% of businesses are providing training. So there is a gap.
There is a gap.
I would flip what you kind of said, James, and say, if you don't reskill, you might become obsolete, your role might change, you might not adapt. However, I would spin that and say, we've seen examples of people within construction, other industries who are retrained in digital and data, and that gives them kind of a really powerful selling point because they have their SME experience and they have the ability to leverage data. And I know Nick's sitting virtually here and it's testament to that. But I think it's a huge, huge opportunity for people to work within their business and grow, but also take it outside and become an entrepreneur, right? Develop your own IP and really change the world. So I think there's a huge opportunity as opposed to it just being left obsolete.
Absolutely. It opens up the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's going to be some sort of a certification, a minimum certification that you'll need to do. And, if you haven't done it, that's all right. And the company is probably going to support you along the way. But you're certainly going to have to have it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I feel very strongly about it because the alternative to us, as in the royal us, as in everyone in the project profession, not doing this is allowing the big companies to take over. So exactly. I don't think we've got any choice. It's that big a deal for me. But the positive news is I think people really are starting to understand that now and see that this and studies like this from Microsoft just kind of back that up, and it all gives credence to what we're trying to say here, which is this is an opportunity. This is exciting. Don't be daunted by it. Dive in. Give it a go. Right. Time, I think, for this little clip that I want to play. So I'm going to share my screen very quickly. We'll listen to this clip from Eric Schmidt, and we can discuss it briefly before we wrap up the podcast. So give me a second. Okay. So I'm going to play this. It's about a minute long, and then we'll have a good chat about it.
Well, first, I hate to tell you, but I think this stuff is underhyped. Underhyped, not overhyped. Because the arrival of intelligence of a non-human form is really a big deal for the world.
And you think it's here?
It's coming, it's here, it's about to happen. It happens in stages. If you look
how quickly, though? I mean,
well, we used to say 20 years, now within 5.
Within 5.
And the reason is the scaling laws for these systems are continuing to go up without any loss or degradation of power. What happened was OpenAI in this generation invented this category. With their Microsoft partnership, they're going to spend $30 to $100 billion on this. Google invented it and then was a late arrival, is in the game. I'm assuming the numbers are similar. You have other entrants that are incredibly interesting. So, for example, Meta has just released a 400 billion model called Llama 3 in open source form, which allegedly is as close to GPT-4, which is from a year and a half ago. So the open source industry is following the closed source. The big winner right now is still NVIDIA. And the reason is that they have a virtual monopoly on the software stack between the hardware and the software that everybody's using.
Wow. So a bit of a long clip there and quite a lot to take in there. But that's no ordinary person. That's Eric Schmidt saying that within 5 years we're going to have AGI. Is it overhyped or do you think he's missing the point?
I wouldn't say it's overhyped. One thing that particularly strikes me is when he says it's happening in stages, because that's slightly different.
Well, he said it was underhyped.
Underhyped, yeah.
So underhyped, yeah, and then it was happening in stages. I find that point interesting because Sam Altman, when he tried to define AGI recently, was that it will be present when it comes to transform our lives, and I don't think that we'll be aware of when that happens. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what those stages are. But I think it currently is underhyped because as we reach like singularity and AGI, machines will be as smart as we are and they'll be able to deliver outputs and outcomes that we cannot comprehend ourselves currently. So we are limited in what our comprehension of what AI can achieve is. And I think that's a level of comfort maybe. But like I said, there's just been complete exponential growth and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't slowed.
Yeah. And I don't think there'll be a moment that we get. I don't think there'll be like the newspapers say we have achieved AGI. It will just,
yes, exactly.
It will organically happen. And like these little announcements. So the announcement from OpenAI today is another step or whatever he said, another kind of milestone along the way. All of a sudden we've got something we can talk to in real time. Another step towards it, feeling like AGI. So I kind of agree with him. I think it is underhyped. I think 5 years is a long, long time in this space now. What do you think, Nick?
I don't know. I think it depends on how you define. Is it all around the sentiment and the number of mentions of AI in social media? Is it how you define hype? Because the way that I would probably define it as the amount of investments and how they grow with time. And what we see is, it's exponential, and it's not just around the software itself, it's the way that the hardware has been developed, the supercomputers which are being invested in, I think that it is certainly not underhyped, because at a certain point, especially back in 2021, everyone was talking about it. I think now it's a bit of a reality check, but there is so much going on at the moment, and it's just like you mentioned with phones. When it first came out, it wasn't that big of a deal, but over iterative improvements, it got to such a point that we don't even notice what a great tech we have with us every single day.
And just building on that, in terms of when I mentioned AI will produce things that we can't comprehend. It's like, I think it was like on a few podcasts back when someone mentioned that when the internet first came out, the first thing someone did was put the yellow pages on the internet.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
the way that so the way that we start to use, the way that we're using AI at the moment might be different in the future. For instance, I saw something slightly unrelated. I think it was the founder of Bumble, and they mentioned that now you can develop your own AI that represents yourself, and that AI can go and speak to another person's AI to see if you're actually a suitor. Now, that's something that I've not heard of anyone even mention in regards to the uses of AI, but it touches on things that we haven't thought of even trying. And I think AI, once it becomes more intelligent, will start to iterate through these decision points and then innovate things which are much more, to us, currently intangible.
Yeah. We're trying to sort of replicate human actions, but actually the change will be stuff that we can't yet.
Yeah, different use cases.
Whatever happens, I mean, it just reminds me of the story about The Singularity is Near, which was the book that Ray Kurzweil did back about 15 years ago. And everyone said his predictions of reaching the singularity by 2035 was absolutely outrageous, no chance. And for the first 10 years, it looked like it was, he was missing all his targets. But, that exponential graph, it doesn't go in a straight line, does it? And now it's looking like we're actually going to beat his predictions. If it's true what Eric Schmidt said, then we're going to get there in the next 5 years. We'll be beating Ray Kurzweil's predictions, who spent the last 15 years being absolutely castigated by people saying that his predictions were well out. So things can change very, very quickly. But yeah, that's all we got time for this time. The only other thing we were going to talk about was the event on, well, when you get this podcast, if you get it on the date it's launched, it'll be the evening, but we can talk, just come along to it and we'll talk about it more then. As we said, there's going to be a special Yoshi and I are going to do on the new OpenAI announcement for GPT-4o, so look out for that. But in the meantime, all I can say is thank you, Nick, so much for appearing. Hope you'll come back another time.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Time flew past. I'm looking at the clock. It's been 1 hour. It felt like 20 minutes.
I know,
really
right?
enjoyed that. Yeah.
We could easily go on, and I think the first episode we did, but we've got to realise that people have probably listened to this in their commute, so we try and keep it to that kind of a time frame. To all the listeners out there, thank you. Please subscribe. It really helps the algorithm, really helps keep us people discovering the show. And we will be back next week with another edition of Project Flux, and the special will be released anytime now. For now, see you later, everyone. Thank you very much, Nick. See you soon, Yoshi.
Thanks, Al.